Hi, welcome to How to D&D. My name is Fred Wheeler, and today I have a guest with me. I'll get him to introduce himself. Chris will introduce himself, and he's got some products, some tabletop role-playing game products that he's working on, or is finished, or is starting, or I can't remember exactly what it all is, but he's going to explain all that stuff to you anyway. Chris, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure, about this. This is Chris Diaz from DSX Machina Games. We've been in the publishing business for various systems since 2008, and we are still going strong. We actually had a few good, really good months.
Yeah, you were
We
saying
we
you
pr
were saying you were shifting over a lot of your stuff to print on demand rather than, which seems to be the thing that everybody else is doing right now too.
Well, it came logically just because when we were looking at like my last campaign, last two campaigns, we did an Ultramodern and Amethyst campaign. And when we calculated like the total campaign from the total money raised from those two campaigns was about 175, $180,000. And once we had everything finished, we printed both campaigns simultaneously. We had them shipped. It took 8 months to do that, which is another detriment to against print on demand. You're looking at 8 months of printing and shipping time. Then once it hit our Tennessee-based distributor, on top of the cost for offset, I got hit with another $32,000 bill for importing, tariffs, and distribution costs. So I was looking at that and the cost for all that stuff, and I'm like, wow, I barely made my own money off of it. So last year, I think, you know what, since I have two books that are coming out that don't have art budgets, maybe a few, but point is I don't need to generate income for anything other than offset. So I'm going to release it on print on demand. I did it for October's Arcane Almanac, which is a compilation of 12 different magic systems. And then I did it again in August for the Bestiary. In the Bestiary, we basically collected all the images that I have commissioned in my travels, mostly through Nick Greenwood, some through M. Wayne Miller. And I threw all the monsters into a single book. Like everything else, it got huge. It was 444 pages. It's the largest book that we've ever put out. And it got to Electrum on DriveThru RPG in 2 months. But more importantly, though, is that after I got it out, I tweaked a few things, sent out the prototype. It's behind me as we speak. This book right here, right? As you can see, it is really, really thick. At 444 pages, I got this a month and a half later. And I was like, okay, now everyone can order this thing, and anyone who orders a PDF can get this thing at cost. So you're getting this book in your hands within 3 months of release. If you were doing it through an offset print, you're looking at, I release a PDF, you're not getting your physical books for another year because it can take that long from proofing to prototyping. Sometimes they'll send you it, sometimes, but China sometimes don't. They'll just send you video of it, and you have to trust that it's going to be good. And then there's the random chance that maybe this printer is ass. Maybe like the very first print run for Ultramodern, we had so many books we had to replace for backers because the books were losing their spine. And I rarely ever have a problem with print on demand. People have complained about certain print on demand, but the Lightning source that DriveThru RPG does, I've not had a bad book from them in quite some time. So
Yeah, I got you sent me this, and it's a huge book, and you could kill a person with it, and that's not even how many monsters in that bestiary, man?
the Bestiary has 440 monsters.
Oh, okay, all right. So yes,
Yeah.
there'll be a few.
Yeah. So, and then I'm following it up now with the Armory. Now, the same thing with the Armory. I only need to commission maybe $200-300 worth of artwork because it's artwork I already have, and it's mostly crunch. I was expecting to just copy paste my rules from the Ultramodern through a few extra things and call it a day. But then I decided, no, I think I'm going to try to include more weapons. And have so I wanted to have a lot of modern firearms. So if I were to ask you, how many guns do you think so there's 150 guns in Ultramodern. How many do you think are in the armory?
On the armory, knowing you, Chris, because you're an insane bastard,
Yeah.
probably 500 plus, I would imagine.
It's going to cross 800 by the end of this
Oh
week.
God, you've gone to another level. Yeah. It,
So
that's for those people who think that 800 seems like a lot. You're never going to use them all. It's a complete waste of your time, probably. You don't need 800. Heck, you didn't even need 500. You probably didn't even need 200, and you got freaking 800 weapons. Um,
so I'm doing the same thing with vehicles, and the important thing to take away from this is that Ultramodern is always run off of tech levels 0 through 5. And 0 is your antique. It's just post-Renaissance. So it's not fantasy, but it's a little bit past that. And then 1 is your kind of late 19th, early 20th century. And we move on to tech level 3 is when we get into futuristic. 4 and 5 gets your Star Trek stuff. So when people go, oh my God, you have 700, 800 guns, I go, yeah, but we have to take into consideration that it separates itself between little tiny derringers and howitzers. And then we have to separate it between time period. I've got, you know, cap and ball Civil War firearms, and then I have laser guns. And so when you split it up and go like that was kind of the issue I had because when I was doing Taurus, which was a steampunk setting, I realized I didn't have enough guns because when I took all the tech level 0 guns, it was like there was like 9. I'm like, no, well, that's not enough. And I realized when I was doing research that turns out there have been like I started to learn I know way too much about guns for someone who's a progressive Canadian.
wow.
Like we were talking before we started recording about the fact that I didn't think that like if you have a longbow, you have a crossbow, that there hasn't been huge strides in crossbow technology since the 1800s.
Yeah.
Turns out that's BS. There have been huge strides in crossbow technology in just the last 20 years. So that I had 1 crossbow, that's now 30 crossbows. Why? Because it turns out there are huge advances, clip fed, things like that. But one of the biggest things I had to approach is I had to go back to the DMG and the player's handbook, even the new 2024 rules, and realize that when I tell people I'm doing firearms for 5e, they say it doesn't work. You can't do firearms for 5e. And I go, why do they keep saying that? They were saying that for 4th edition. They were saying that for 3rd edition. And I looked at it and go, the reason why is that the writers of Wizards of the Coast never bothered to try to make them make sense. When they created their weapons, they went, okay, here are all the melee weapons. Let's just throw a crossbow and a longbow, and let's not think too hard about the rules regarding them, even though the rules regarding them are kind of a joke. And when they did those 2 pages, only 2 pages of modern firearm rules in the Dungeon Master's Guide, it was clear that they put no effort whatsoever in creating a balancing system for firearms. And when someone says, "Oh, those weapons don't work," that's proof and example. I go, "No, it just means that they're lazy." So I realized with the armory that I couldn't be lazy. I had to make these weapons realistic. You're giving me a look.
Well, here's the problem. Because if we talk about 2014's Player's Handbook for Dungeons and Dragons,
Hmm.
is there like 30, 35 weapons on that in that section for that book? I think it probably can't be more than about 35 to 30 weapons. There's not that many, right?
Hmm.
Which is less than what 3.5 had. Heck, it might even be less than what 4E had. I can't remember, but and certainly it's a lot less than what AD&D had. Not less than basic, but basic D&D is a bit different. So
Yeah.
I think what they did is they streamlined things rather than. And when people say it can't be done, and that Wizard of the Coast is lazy, I think it's not just lazy. I think it's the inability to be able to do that. I don't think they really got the right people capable to make that happen.
Well, it comes down to a fact that when it comes to melee weapons, and we'll get technical for a quick second, you have a damage value range from 1 die 4 to 2 die 8. So you have those combinations. You have like 8 or 9 different steps, and then you have 7 or 8 different properties and then ranges, and you basically swap those around until you get every combination. And the only way to, and of course, when you look at melee weapons in general, you can either bruise them, you can slash them, you can pierce them. There isn't a lot of variety. When we get to but my issues with them is when they got to range weapons, they're like, okay, do we make this in any way realistic, or do we just make it a just balanced to what it was. And the biggest problem that came out was the fact that in the rules, a heavy crossbow and a musket, they do like 1 die 10 damage. And so, okay, fine. You create the baseline that that an arrow does more damage than a longsword, but let's get past that little novelty. And we look at the fact that a heavy crossbow says, oh yes, because of this loading rule, you can only fire it once on your round, no matter how many times you can attack. You can still only fire a heavy crossbow once. And of course, my look at it, or the same thing with a musket, you can fire a musket only once, no matter how many times you can attack. And I was like, really? I can fire a musket every 6 seconds. That's some amazing musket speed, because no person in the history of creation has ever reloaded and fired a musket in 6 seconds.
What is it?
So
Is
when
it?
I
It's
was
about 1 minute 15 seconds to even for a highly skilled individual, I could probably reload in just a minute and just over a minute, something like that.
The fastest on record for a musket was 30 seconds.
Oh, that's pretty quick, man.
Yeah. So, and the same thing happened with a crossbow. The fastest someone could reload a crossbow is about 22 seconds. So I was just like, okay, so the first thing I have to do, and then that's the problem, is that once they got the firearms, like, well, what's so special about a firearm? Where the firearms can fire as many times as you want. And then so they threw in rules. So the first thing I had to do, I had to say, okay, this system doesn't work. So now, guys, there's even a another company did a 5e Civil War game. And they're friends of mine. I know them. They've actually sent me their books. And I noticed that they threw in a couple extra new rules, but they still kind of stuck to the idea that you could fire a musket remarkably fast within the confines of your setting. I go like, if a full round is 6 seconds. So I went in and said, okay, in the original D&D, they have loading and then they have a reload rule and that's it. I'm thinking, okay, I'm gonna have to expand on this because I asked my fans, okay, what kind of firearms do you want? And the one guy said, I want a Lamont grape shot revolver. I'm like, oh, so you've seen Westworld because that's the only time anyone famous ever wielded a Lamont revolver. And do you know what a Lamont revolver is?
Not really. No.
Uh, a, it so imagine a revolver but it doesn't plop out. You don't put cartridge ammunition in it. You have to once at a time. You have to open it up. You need to shove black powder. You have to put a paper round, which is just a little piece of paper with has gunpowder, and then you have to put your ball in because it's a shot weapon, and then it actually comes with an inbuilt lever push. That's actually part of the pistol, and then you push that cap and ball into the revolver. And then you repeat it and you push the revolver and you push the ball and you push the lever down. You do that 9 times. And then you got to, on the other side, you've got to take your little caps, your little percussion caps, and you have to put a percussion cap on each of those nine chambers, and then you can fire this weapon 9 times. So I'm like, you want this weapon? Fine, but here are the cap and ball rules. Because once you fire this weapon in a combat encounter, you are not reloading it because you do not have 2 minutes to spare to reload a Lamont revolver. And the other thing is that it's called a grape shot because it's famous because it has a shotgun undermount on this pistol, which you also have to load with shot, and then you have to you can't put a shotgun shell in it. So I realized I had to throw in all these rules. So it was just like, yeah, you want to reload a musket? Here are the actions that you have to take. You can spend an action or you can spend movement, which I added a new rule. Because there's a video, I saw a hilarious video of somebody trying to reload a musket while running at full speed, which is a very hilarious video because it turns out it's very difficult.
It is very difficult. It can be done, and and they did do it. It was actually a thing that was done in reality. I know this because I watched the making of Last of the Mohicans, and they
Mm.
had to get a specialist in who still understood how to load on the run with a musket. It's extremely difficult, and it does still take time, and you can't really because you're doing two things at the same. Well, you're running and you're reloading, so it's not like you're going to be running at full speed because you still have to concentrate on it and on getting the everything in the right place. So it's actually quite difficult to do, but it can be done, and it was something that they did learn to do. But really, I mean, that kind of nuance, I don't, why the hell does it have to be in a game? You might as well just go and get a real gun and run around in the bush with it, running around and trying to reload it, shooting people and animals, if that's really what you want to do. My question is, dude, how many tech levels? Are there 8 tech levels in this armory?
There's 5.
So you got more than 100, 100 weapons for every tech level at least.
Separated once again, because once again, when I say the
Yeah, yeah.
fact that, yeah, you have the Civil War weapons, you have your rifles, but then I also, like, for example, I have tank guns because there are tanks in the book. So I need to, there's, so just right now, for example, I am creating stats for about 30 different tank guns for all the real tanks and military vehicles because turns out there have been once again, large advances in artillery technology and creating rules for that. So, and the same thing that's also splits off the fact that 16 of those or 32 of those are the crossbows. Same, I also have biological, like organic weaponry,
Hmm.
depending on your setting, steampunk weaponry. When I was doing Taurus, I discovered there were a lot of very weird weapons, and I discovered in talking to playtesters and fans how much they loved wanting to use the weirdest weapons because they were like, oh yeah, in the Civil War, most people didn't have revolvers. They didn't have cartridge weapons. 90% of the people in the Old West were still using their parents' Civil War rifles. So they were still using cap and ball and blunderbusses. That's because that's what they had. And I found that really fascinating that the fact that a player goes, I want to have a Lamont revolver. I go, do you understand the consequences? They're like, yes, I do. I'm like, very well. Because players like to be eccentric. And I realized that there was this demand for the strangeness of technology in general. And
Hmm.
I found that was interesting. But for me, it was more fascinating. Like we were talking ahead about the changes in air rifles.
Hmm.
Like when someone says an air rifle to me, up until 3 weeks ago, I thought they meant airsoft rifles. Little paintball guns. I thought it was paintball guns and then guns. I didn't realize there was a huge subgroup of air-powered lethal firearms.
Hmm.
It's like the deep dives that I have fallen into. I had a deep dive for 3 days on crossbows because I found this crazy German guy that makes these weird crossbows. And the same thing was I discovered that there's been huge advances in air rifle technology. Like it's just crazy things like little cylinders about 6 inches long that can be pumped to 4,500 psi, and you load them in like shotgun shells into this revolver, and then it destroys everything in its path. I'm like, well, I have to put that in the game because someone's going to go, ooh, that's in here. I want to use this because it'll be interesting.
Hmm. So the question, Chris, because we probably need to talk about the other products you've got, and we could talk about weapons all you like, but the reality is, so can you have firearms and other types of weapons other than the stuff that you find in 5E's Player's Handbook? Can you? Can it be done? The answer would be yes, it can be done. Um, and if you don't think it can be done, it's probably because you're not capable of doing it or you've never seen it done. Well, guess what? It has been done. There is a book out there. Somebody's done it, and probably somebody's done it before you as well, Chris. Maybe
Hmm.
not to the extent of 800 sodding weapons, but yeah, I think you're covered, people. So if you're worried about and don't think that can be done, yeah, it just mean it's been done. It's there. It's physical now.
It was weird too because I actually got bullied off of Reddit because they were insisting it couldn't be done. And I'm like, I'm not even the only guy publishing 5e non-fantasy rules. Hyperlanes is out there. Gene Funk is out there. Everyday Heroes, if you want to support that company, they do non-fantasy rule sets. I mean, and then you go back to fourth edition and third edition. There are hundreds of third edition games that were non-fantasy, and I don't understand why people are still saying you can't do it.
Well, it's because, dude, there's a reason why I have, I mean, I've got lots of social media, not a lot as compared to some other people, but I've never gone to Reddit. Reddit is full of a mixture of vast quantities of sometimes positive, but quite often really negative cultist whack jobs. So I avoid Reddit. I don't think it's a very useful thing. I'm sure it can be used for good, but it can also be used for evil, and maybe and some really, really strange opinions that come out. Anyway, So, yeah, you guys are covered for your armory stuff pretty well in terms of weaponry. It's not going to be a problem. Does the armory include armor, not just weapons?
Yeah, so there's actually six sections to the book. So the first section is standard gear,
Yeah.
cybernetics, and then we've also got a section that's got aircraft and ground vehicles. Ground vehicles, what I'm working on now, which is the reason why I'm doing tanks. And then we have an armor section. And the armor section, as you might have predicted, looking at the small ration of armor, once again, there isn't a lot of selection. You have 12 to 20. That's basically all you got. So when looking at those rules, I realized, yeah, it turns out there isn't like, so the armor section is not nearly as big. But where I got to have fun was having fun with the tech level 3 up stuff. So having fun with mecha and powered armor. So there's powered armor. So, and then it ended up being like large mecha, and then I decided to put in rules for huge mecha. So huge mecha are literally armor suits that multiple players can use at the same time. So
Ultron.
yeah, basically, yeah. There's actually there's a mech suit that's classified as armor that three players can use at the same time, and the idea that every time a player order pops up, that player gets to activate that suit and use it, but they're all sharing the same suit. So there obviously has to be some communication. One person is a commander, so they can't override the other players. And there's a few other rules we put in. So that was having fun. So there's about, I would say, about 100 of those. But that's different. It's easy because when I ask people, I go, what kind of fictitious pop culture things do they want when it comes to guns, vehicles, or armor? And so people throw out their ideas. Like some people are going, oh, we want the service revolver from Control. And I'm like, okay, that's in the game now, so still people give me ideas and goes, oh, I want the Auto 9 that RoboCop has. All right, that's in the game. What else do you got? And the same thing happened with armor. People will say, well, we want to have this armor suit from this video game. I'm like, okay, it's in the game. I mean, all the artwork, and sometimes I do rename them. So, that was most of the tech level 3 stuff, whether it be armor vehicles or guns, are just pop culture, reskinnings.
Right.
So there's a lot of stuff.
Cool. Well, armory. And I believe now is that's available now?
It's not out. It's going to be out this year. That's the plan. I'm working on new artwork, and the issue is that, as I mentioned, I keep on adding new things. Like as you know,
Oh,
I'm adding ground vehicles. Ground vehicles are what I'm working on now, but I need to add tank guns to get to make that complete. Then I'm doing aircraft. Once I finish aircraft, the book is done. I have to wait for artwork. My hope is to get it released this year. The whole project came about as a bit of a skew because I was working on another book called the Sparkplug Chronicles, and I realized I needed the armory finished for that book to work.
and that when it's finished, it's going to be available where's drive-through RPG print on demand?
DriveThru RPG, print on demand, same thing as before. I don't know if it's going to be as big as the 440-page armory. We'll see what happens.
If I was a betting man, I would suspect it may be a bit bigger, knowing you, Chris.
Eh, tables. Monster stats they take up a lot of space, like
Yes,
one monster per page.
yeah,
But I could put like 100 guns on one tape on one page and call it a day.
yeah, I suppose that's true. All right, so you said something about the Spark Plug Chronicles. So
Yeah.
this is another project that you've got in the works.
Yeah, so unlike the Armory, which is crunch, the Sparkplug Chronicles is mostly fluff. It's setting stuff like like Affinity and Amethyst, which they're kind of a framework of adding setting and creating a cool universe for people to play around in. And it is a dystopian alternate universe, retrofuturistic dystopian extraction shooter, and which is a confusing thing for people to hear. An extraction shooter is a term used in video games. It's the idea of you're entering a hostile territory, you're going to try to grab as much valuables as you can and get out before you get killed.
Just sounds like Dungeons and Dragons with a gun, frankly.
Yes, except in
Maybe not,
D&D very
maybe not in a
D
dungeon, but it's only different.
well, D&D is also the roguelike where if you die, you don't get to come back. You're like you're dead. Well, guess what? Now there's you know Ragnarok 2 who's the exact same dwarf who comes in. But in this is there's actually a game mechanic for you to go in and if you die, you your original character is still alive, but you wake up back at the point of origin, and you have to go back in to find the stuff that you left behind. In the setting, it is this it's a dystopian body horror, biopunk setting. That's an alternate universe. That's something that actually happened in real history. Most people think of Roswell as the only kind of famous UFO incident in the States. There was actually one in 1897 in Aurora, Texas. So I use that as my kind of entry point to create this alternate universe. And the idea is that there are these things called spark plugs that if they get implanted in you, they give you this spark of creation to creating technology that doesn't exist on this planet. And it's called the SPARKPLUG Chronicles because it deals with how the world gets changed with this injection of alien technology way back before World War One. And this comes in the form of genetically engineered life forms, biological engines, the idea that this engine called a trophon, which is this biological engine, actually supersedes the internal combustion engine. And so when we get to stuff like World War One or World War Two, you're seeing these biological tanks. Imagine the tanks that have tentacles coming out of them. And as a result, the world starts to turn to crap as more things start happening as a side effect of this technology. By the time you get to the 80s, which is when the setting is, this beginning of the setting, there are these huge black zones, which are these destroyed areas full of biological pollution and genetically engineered abominations. But it is also the repository of this extremely valuable technology and valuable resources. And so one of the genetically engineered creatures that people use is something called a hollow, which transforms into you when you're controlling it remotely. So it looks like you, it wears all your clothes because it's wearing all the gear. You're controlling it going into a black zone. And if it gets killed, well, unfortunately, it drops and all the gear. So now you, the original character who hasn't been changed, has to go in, maybe with another hollow, and find all the gear and stuff that your dead body might have, and hopefully get there before somebody else comes in and ransacks your corpse. So that's the basic premise of the setting. It's very dystopian, it's kind of got a cosmic horror aspect, but it also has these new mechanics. One of the arbitrary rules I put into the setting was that this spark technology, this alien technology, creates unbelievable variety of technology, but not a single spark creates a gun. It creates vehicles, it creates hover vehicles, it creates genetically engineered people, but none of them create weapons of destruction. So all the weapons have to be the real human weapons that have been developed around that time period. And once I did that, I realized I need to create lots of firearms from the 20th century. And that's why I decided I have to stop what I'm doing and do the armory because I was creating all of these weapons and I'm like, this should just be in the armory. So I wrote the armory and so I can then copy paste that specific small segment of firearms over to that. But that's creating. I've always been a fan of adapting video game mechanics into 5e, which has pissed off a lot of people who want me to play within like the lines of 5e. And I keep on trying to go, no, this is a completely foreign mechanic that can adapt itself to 5e. You could create it and have fun. And some people don't really care for that. They want their class to look like every other class and not be like, wait a second, there's a power tree for this class. Like I have to follow trees of progression. Like there's no 5e class that does that. And I go, yeah, because I got the idea from a video game. And so there's a lot of video game mechanics that I like placing into stuff. Affinity has 4 or 5 different video game mechanics in 5e. Amethyst does it as well. And so with this game, I'm taking some of the things we see in some of the really popular extraction shooters, like Helldivers. Right now, there's one called Arc Raiders, which just blew up like last week. It's the #1 game on Steam, and I'm playing and I'm looking at what people enjoy about that game. And then we'll say, okay, can I adapt it to 5e? And the answer, of course, is yes, you can adapt anything to anything. because it's just words on a paper. You can just rewrite things and make it work.
Hmm. So, I guess my impression of Sparkplug is the body snatchers with a twist, reversed, kind of.
Yes, and in many ways, it deals with it's one of those situations where let's give the keys to extremely high technology to humans and let them annihilate themselves without an alien whisper. It's just like it's one of those situations where what if you went back in time and just gave some random group in history modern firearms and not even modern firearms, just give them the internal combustion engine 1,000 years ago with the knowledge to how to build it. How would they take that and go, well, we can do this and make massive war machines that we you give it to one side in some medieval conflict and they'll find some way to turn it into a weapon of war. And I can say, no, I didn't mean for you to do this. And they're like, no, we're fine, we're good. We can take your knowledge of vehicles and make a tank 600 years ago because that's kind of the allegory of the setting that this alien technology comes down to give people this knowledge that allows them to to potentially be a utopia, but instead we just use it to make war. In fact, the black zones that get formed happen when these biotech machines get used for war. If you use them for farm equipment or transportation, they're relatively peaceful. They never mutate, they never pollute, they never kind of kind of explode. But the first spark plug, a guy named Johann Wagner, fled the States and went to Germany in the late 1920s, he gave that knowledge to Germany before World War II. And you can imagine what would happen if Germany had access to that type of alien technology at the beginning of World War II. The death toll of World War II was double. The supply line problem that happened in Operation Barbarossa didn't happen. So suddenly they were able to push into Russia without that problem. But because the Germans were abusing these military machines, they started to explode and rebel and mutate. And so the German front line collapsed, not because of supply lines, is because their own machines started to wake up and attack them. And that's where you started creating these black zones, which these roaming biomechanical monstrosities are wandering around this now alien landscape that's being terraformed from the pollution caused from us misusing this alien technology. And in many ways, the main characters, the player characters, who are characters called Reapers, which is kind of an homage to Stalker, are just scavengers stealing what they can from this world before it dies, because one of the last technologies they've created are portals to other worlds. And so the player characters may not even be from this world. They may be people from our real world that are traveling to this dying planet and stealing what they can before, someone turns off the lights on this dying world. It's a very dystopian type of presentation, but that's once again on par of the course for a lot of these extraction shooters. There's usually something dark and negative about the setting.
So, so I guess what I'm thinking here is because I think a lot of people have sort of assumed that the technological advance that you can have in anything is going to be AI, artificial intelligence, right?
Yeah.
And that is sort of the top end. What you've done is what I think is probably much more likely is that artificial intelligence is just another step. It is going to be supplanted by, AI rewriting itself, its code is one thing. But once an organism figures out how to rewrite other organisms' DNA or their own DNA, then it's a whole different ball game. And it sounds like you're kind of going in that direction where the technology is about rewriting in very various ways the genetic code of yourself or something else that's biological. Um, and
Yeah. The
obviously,
idea, yeah.
obviously, all of the stuff around somebody's own mental faculties or the mental illnesses that most of us have in some way, the ways that we think are actually manifest themselves physically in the world. So, if the way that I guess it almost sounds as if the way that this technology is used and the way that you think determines the success of that technology, but also the impact it has on other organisms in this world that you're talking about. Is that basically what we're
Yeah,
talking
yeah,
about?
you hit the nail on the head. It is an allegory for the fact that when there's a knowledge or a technology, whether or not it is positive or a detriment to our society, that has nothing to do with the technology or the knowledge itself, but how we apply it.
Yeah.
And that is a definite allegory towards, artificial intelligence nowadays, toward whether it be nuclear power, internal combustion. You can name the technology where here are the positives of nuclear power, and then this is how we're going to corrupt it and turn it into something that annihilates us. Uh, so the fact that, for example, the only thing that comes close to actual AI, or of course biological computers, called biocores, and the same situation applies. And the funny thing is, it comes out to a point where the setting does imply that, oh yeah, if humanity was responsible and wasn't just completely selfish and self-centered, this world would not have died. This world wouldn't be in the state it was now. It is entirely because it's it's quite literally the fact that with you, it's people make a point of abusing machines and abusing technology because there's no way it can feel pain. There's no, and the fact that you have the allegory of misusing technology, but now we have a situation where when we hurt technology, that technology will turn back and hurt us. And in the setting, it is quite literally a living organism.
So the technology is biological. Do you know, I don't know, did I ever tell you I did my degree in psychology and philosophy and mathematics? And
No, but I find that fascinating.
so one of the going theories that are out there, and we won't even know any time in my lifetime or many lifetimes if we get that far, is the theory that our use of manufactured technology, artificial intelligence, and biological technology, that whether that's rewriting our own physical form or genetics or something, some other animal or biological plant or whatever, our ability to do that is only going to probably be stabilized when we reach the next point in our evolution, biologically, where every entity is actually connected consciously to another. Um, because as long as a biological entity is its own thing, and it doesn't understand all the other things around it, it will view them as exploitable, a threat, or something else. Something you eat, something you kill, something to be afraid of, da 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 da. Once everything is connected, and a sort of I guess a global consciousness, then you can feel the feelings and experience the thoughts of those other entities. And that is probably where biological is probably going to understand that it can actually exist without chewing itself up in this world that you've created. Um, we won't know if that's actually the case, but the theory, the theory could be applied, I guess, to artificial intelligence. If artificial intelligence only problem is I think artificial intelligence may be capable of not warring on itself, but it may not necessarily not consider organic organisms not a threat. But yeah, the theory being that that collective consciousness is the bridge that would solve a lot of that. I don't know.
Yeah, it's fascinating because, within the confines of the setting, player characters can either be one of these genetically engineered life forms, or they can be a spark themselves. Now, a spark is a person who's got this little device implanted, and that makes them kind of semi more than human. But there is this idea that there is a there's this semi-collective consciousness, because in the game it states that there's only 565 sparks, 565 inventions. I randomly pulled that number out. It said 565 inventions, and that means there's only and the original person that makes these sparks is the only person that can make them. So if somebody dies, he can remake that spark. So there is this type of connection between them. I also find it fascinating talking about what you were talking about just now, about the way we have inadvertently become reliant on technology in a psychological, if not an evolutionary sense. The fact that, for example, people say, why do people not remember things? Is because our brains know that we have external mnemonic devices that'll help us remember things. So your brain goes, I don't need to remember this person's phone number because my brain tells me that I have a external mnemonic device, my phone, that'll tell me the phone number of these people. And that's why most people remember the phone numbers that they grew up with, but they can't remember the phone number that they have now. And that's because their brains have been rewritten to believe, like my mind isn't just confined in this skull. My mind has kind of subconsciously and almost metaphysically expanded into the physical hard drive of my computer, the physical phone in my hand, because it has become an extension of my mind. So when I say, what does this mean? Yeah, I know so many. I had a friend who's a theoretical math major, and he was surprised that I could run math in my head faster than he could. And he said most mathematicians are really bad at rudimentary math. They need their calculator for that because their brain wasn't programmed to think in just basic mathematical skills. So they need this device. Most people think when you have a cybernetic implant, that's that becomes part of you, and that's kind of that cyberization. They don't realize the fact that this in many ways is a cybernetic implant. It is much of our person. Sure, it's not embedded in our head, but so many people can't live without it. They have to be within arm's reach of their cell phone because it contains an aspect of their personality. Sorry, that was just in
Yeah,
response
yeah,
to what you just said.
yeah. I mean, that phone too. Unfortunately, that phone will cause an organism to not advance properly.
Yeah, and I'm not saying this is a healthy thing. I'm just
No,
saying this
no.
is something as a result.
But yeah, yeah. I think a lot of people have always so have you got cybernetics included? So the incorporation of artificial hardware into organic hardware as well in this spark plug thing?
So because Spark technology is always biomechanical, or is something that's technological that interacts with biomechanical,
Mm.
the organetics, as I call them in the setting, are genetically grown new, like there's cybernetics, but it's kind of I hate to use the word Cronenberg-like aspect where it is a biologically reprogrammed organ that does something that a cybernetic device would do, but it's a living thing. It actually is implanted. It's like a new organ in your body that does something that your body doesn't do. And the interesting thing, of course, is that like everything else, it's based off this alien design. So you basically are implanting an alien biological implant in your head or in your body to give you the same benefits. And in essence, a massive rewriting of just lore to get to the same result of Cyberpunk 2020. Like, I want to have this Cyberpunk 2020 implant. Well, if this is the same thing that does it, except in your setting, it's a nanomolecular carbon-based piece of technology that's powered. And here, it's a parasitic organism that we've grown in a lab. They do the same thing, except this one's a little creepier and a little bit more disturbing because for some reason, I think I like taking people's juxtaposition. Like when I posted photos, some of the images that we've created for the setting, and I posted it on the world building Reddit group. Most people were just like, that looks horrific. And then they read the lore about how kind the Trophon powered vehicles were and how they would remember their owner's favorite destinations. And they're like, why is the image so disturbing? And there's like, oh, they're just pets. Oh yeah, and everyone's like, oh, I want a Trophon powered car. That'd be awesome. You lift up the hood, it's a biological living organism that's with a heart and pulse beating. You close the hood, it looks like a regular car. No, you just gotta feed it, food, water, and give it some sunlight, and it works just like a car. And it was like, yeah, I want one of those things now. I go, yeah, but you do realize the disturbing image of opening up the hood and seeing a biological thing.
Mm.
For some reason, it was surprising how many readers were looking at that and were willing and able to embrace something that normal people would immediately go, that's why would you want to do that? I go, well, why would you want to implant a cybernetic implant in your head? How is that any better than an alien parasitic organism that's going to do the same thing?
And also too, I don't know in your world, but a lot of log. For those of you who haven't figured it out, there is, I would say, I'm not like I know for sure, but my understanding is that an organism that has artificial implants, your cyborg, basically,
Yeah,
is a lower tech than having an organism that incorporates a specially designed organism to interact, whether it's parasitic, symbiotic, or designed specifically for the other organism to be more able to do what it needs to do.
yeah.
That is more advanced technology, far more advanced technology than the machine and the organism combined. Organism to organism is far more advanced technology. Um, yeah, so
It,
I'm
yeah.
impressed. I like the idea. But also too, I mean, you also got to, when you say it seems disgusting, think about it. When you look at something on the outside, it seems fine. But if you were to cut me open, I don't look that great on the inside. It would be gross. So
Yeah.
yeah, totally
And
understand
the
that.
funny thing is that in the setting, the mutations, the thanatic reflex, it's called, that happens to machines, it's when it's what happens is that if it's in war where it gets abused either by enemy fire or by its owners, what ends up creating situations is that they mutate, and they mutate by expanding, coming out of their shells, and you're seeing the abuse manifest. It's like it's one of those situations. It's horrible allegory of it. It's appropriate where if you abuse people, you abuse animals, that abuse is very much internalized. It's psychological. But in this setting, when you abuse these machines, that psychological abuse manifests physically as an external mutation, and suddenly it becomes a monster. And it's hard for me whenever I'm writing something and my brain goes allegory and I point to it and I go, oh, I'll go in that direction, even though the end result might be quite disturbing.
Yeah, what you're really talking about is an organism that if you present the wrong simulation, the wrong environment, it will readapt itself. And that usually takes, thousands, millions of years to actually have any kind of significant change. Whereas what you sounds like you're talking about is you've got organisms that are able to rewrite their genetic code much more quickly. So, yeah, not using them the way that they're supposed to be used or in a healthy way results in a an alteration to the genetic code, which you could call a mutation, but it's actually an adaptation to what's going on at the present time. So
Yeah, it's kind of like an alien genetic plasticity
yeah.
where they've created these things and they're like it's one of those things if you create an environment that is positive, these things will encourage that positivity. But if you create something that's dark, they won't repair that darkness. They'll take that darkness and reflect that darkness back to you.
Mm, yeah. I have a question. With
Yeah.
Sparkplug, does this include any adventures or starter adventures or the structures and tools to build your own adventures?
Well, primarily what it's going to do, because of the format of the setting, it's going to create, we're going to have maps of the different black zones and then create encounters and basically because we're not going to create there's going to be adventure ideas for GMs based on popular culture and so forth. But most of the time, we're just like, we know in the environment of the game and the games that we're inspired by, that a lot of times players are going to go, we're just going to walk into this territory and we're going to walk to this destination because we know on our map that it has certain amounts of rewards. And the GM's like, great. And the zone, like once they cross into this zone, I go, okay, here's when the challenge rating increases. And this is when the challenge rating increases again. So the GM, it's not just, oh, we're just going to randomly send you cobalt your way. I'm like, no, no, no. You're a level 4 beast. If you want to go to this building, which you know possesses this advanced biocore, and you want to steal some of its flesh wire, you know that the challenge rating of that area is 8. So you're like you're gauging your own level of risk. Like we're 5, can we survive encounters in this area? So a lot of times it's players creating their own narrative. And now sometimes the destinations and the missions that the GM will present, like there are some classic escorting stories. I need you to travel into this area to do this, and so forth. There are a bunch of random objectives, but it is definitely more an organic, ironically, a kind of constructing an idea where in the end of the game, like we're giving you a mission to go in this dungeon to steal this crown. And now we're going to a players and like, you're all regular people who are selfish and want money, right? Just like any other D&D character. Everybody knows that, there is a valuable at this location. Do you want to try for it? It's not, there may be a dungeon aspect, but it's probably open area. And a good example of that, like I said, I took a lot of inspiration from movies. The Gorge recently was a film that's very heavily inspired. The film Annihilation with Natalie Portman, right? You give them an objective. Your husband has vanished in this area and not returned. You're going in. What are you going to see? Guess what? You don't know. Because some of these black zones, people are like, well, we know what's in the outer perimeter of this black zone, but no one has come back surviving, gotten past 4 kilometers into the zone. Once again, taking inspiration to Tarkovsky's Stalker. Like, I have an Appendix N, which lists about 20, 30 books, movies, and games that you can take inspiration from and you can borrow ideas from. And they all kind of can fit with very little modification within the setting. Or not. Maybe players just want to go in, steal some stuff, and get out before they get killed.
All right, so let me see if I can boil this down to what I kind of understand. I don't know if I'm on the right track or not. So we're really talking about kind of like a sandbox where it's very fluid, and you can probably pretty much do whatever you need to as a game master with this, I'm assuming. So it sounds like it's tools. Sounds like it's tools for I guess, more location-based adventure design structure with emergent play, where the players actually create the adventure depending on where they go. Would that be
Yeah,
about
there's
right?
definitely a sandbox aspect to it.
Yeah.
Now, that being said, when I generally run games, I will create a narrative, but in a lot of ways, it's the same type of thing when you're playing a sandbox video game, where some players want to pursue the story, but a lot of players don't care.
Hmm.
Whenever you have a sandbox game, whether it be Grand Theft Auto or something like that, there is this story that you can pursue if you want, but you don't have to.
Right.
You can just go in there and grind the setting per se to gain more power. We even included a mechanic to extend that, which is something that's going to be controversial. I call it a prestige system, which is not something I've named. It's a common thing in a lot of video games, where when you reach a certain level, you actually reset back to first level. You gain a permanent buff to your character, but you're starting back at level 1. And that's a way of trying to extend the sequence of that period to make sure that players are almost always going to be in that lower tier. Because there are some monsters at our higher tier that you are probably never going to have to deal with. It was a way of trying to stop players from thinking that they're godlike.
Right.
by keeping them into that lower level. Now you're getting that prestige level, you're getting additional buff. So if you're eighth level, you're probably more powerful than an eighth level fantasy character, but you've also spent about 45 levels getting there because it's taken you that long.
Is that too? It doesn't sound like prestige classes from 3.5. Is that
No, no, it's
this sounds to me like a reset to keep the numbers under control.
basically, yeah. So the Prestige name has been used in a couple of games. Call of Duty plays with Prestige, Forever Winter plays with Prestige. The idea being that once you reach, let's say you're level one, you get to level two, you get to unlock the next level, but then you reset back to one. So you have to reclimb to get to level three. Once you get to level three, you reset back to one, but now you can get to four. And every single time you reset, you get a buff. And the buffs are more powerful the higher levels up. So you get a buff at level one, level two, level three, level four. You can get a buff at a lower level if you want. And some of these are mechanical, some of these are setting based, some of these are literally your own reputation. You're more popular, you're more well known, you can call on bigger favors, but you are still back at being a first level character. And this goes all the way to level 10. So once again, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6. Add those all together, you get to give an idea of how many levels you have to advance. Now, the irony, of course, is that because XP becomes so difficult, going back to first level, you're not going to stay first level for very long. You're going to move up the ranks quite quickly. But it's still going to be a situation where your character does sit in the lower levels a lot longer, and it creates. But of course, in order to prevent you from throwing away your character, we have the hollow mechanic, which allows you to remote control doppelgangers of your character that you are remote controlling in these battlefields. So you're like, oh, my character, my holo died. Darn, I am out 500 credits. I'll just buy another one. I have to go in and grab my armor and my gear, and then I can start again. So you're also not getting screwed going into it. But there are some other rules. There's one NPC in the game that has an implant that allows him to wirely control three duplicates of himself. And so he goes into an encounter. There's actually three versions of himself connected by cables. Like there's a lot of weird things that you can
Mhm.
do with this setting that are based around this kind of biotechnology.
So I have a question. So
Hmm.
Sparkplug, does this? I'm assuming it doesn't have rules for the milestone system where you just follow a complete an objective or whatever to get to the next level. We're counting experience points. Is that the only system in place?
No, no, there'll be ways to play with it both. It comes down to
Okay.
the GM about the fact that, you know, reaching certain milestones, depending on the amount, like certain milestones can be gauged in what type of reward you bring, because the rewards are manifesting as something called Warborn. It isn't just you're not going in to steal cash. You're going in to steal technology. You're going in to steal Warborn, and Warborn are these natural materials, these organic materials that have been created as a byproduct of the alien pollution. It's almost inspired by Tiberium from the Command and Conquer series. I'm not sure if you've ever played that series. It's been around for
I've heard of
40
it.
years.
I don't remember playing it, but I did play a lot of Command and Conquer, but I think it's
Yeah.
very early Command and Conquer.
Yeah.
Um, okay, so now if you can go experience points or you can go milestone, there is sounds like there is a milestone way.
Yeah.
Are there rules or guidelines of some kind to awarding experience points? I guess based on combat, collecting treasure, or completing objectives, interactions. Like, is it just for getting stuff out of whatever zone you go into, or shooting stuff, or is there a pretty broad sort of guideline for how to assign that?
For me, I'm trying personally to like because that still system is still in flux. I had finished the prestige system when I started getting into firearms. So like I would like it to personally be um not killing things. The killing things are like it's a byproduct, but because the prestige system is very much your own success, it's the completing of objectives where it's the mission you've taken up. Like there'll be like, bulletin boards are like, oh, there's escort missions. I want you to retrieve this. I need to get to this room. So I lost a family in there. I need you to rescue them. The objectives fall into it. And then once again, based on the severity of the task, you like the objective may be further in some of these zones than others. And that zone itself, you've successfully achieved that objective. And that's where I want to, like, for example, a good example would be because these black zones are tiered with different difficulties. If you manage to get through one tier, regardless of whatever creatures you manage to kill in the same context, you might not want to physically engage in these monsters. Perhaps your success, your milestone, that experience comes from you avoiding the fight completely because everything around you was way too powerful. And maybe it's best that you just survive by getting through and using stealth to get you through an area. And that going through an area is the success that you get your rewards to. I would personally like to move away from the direct let's kill the dragon
Mm.
to, you know, we just need to steal this dragon's treasure. We
So,
need this. That's more interesting to me
so
than the
you,
killing of
you
the dragon.
so even though we're talking about a very advanced world and very advanced technology, you're actually using gameplay, really old school gameplay philosophy in terms of advancement.
Yeah, going out of the
Yeah.
I have to kill it thing, and that was inspired partially by the another video game which is called Forever Winter, and in Forever Winter you're a scavenger. It in the promotional poster it has this giant mech with guns, and it says you are not this guy, and it has this little guy with a little backpack and says you are this guy, and the fact that 90% of the opponents when you drop, um, if you get into a firefight, you're screwed. Most things will kill you very, very quickly. And so for a good chunk of the game, you're just hiding and going through. And the thing about the game is that this called Forever Winter because there's a permanent war going on between multiple factions. You are not on one of those factions, but you're walking through a battlefield where you're trying to steal stuff while these factions are fighting. And some of these are battle tanks, some of these are 50, 60-foot tall mechs, floating battleships, and none of those are things you can kill. And you just don't want you want to get through an encounter. You want to steal this bio core and get to the extraction point before any of them knows that you're there. And I find that fascinating.
So this is actually more retrieval being more important.
Yeah, depending on this because that's
I
basically
mean,
what.
that would be what probably a common objectives is retrieval, escort.
Yeah.
Not yeah, you probably wouldn't. I guess it sounds like you wouldn't see an objective that would be eliminate,
Yeah,
eliminate or destroy.
there
No,
would be a couple. There's naturally
like
there's going to be several.
okay,
There's going to be several about them. But most of those, if there's going to be an elimination one, you decide you have to go like, well, the issue with an elimination one, because if someone says, oh, we need you to take the biocore from this one Trophon mechanized machine, you can look at it and go, we got no chance of killing this thing. But if you go, we need to, this is an errant wreckage and the biocore is there, you're like, well, we might be able to take it. And then that randomization rule is like, well, we don't know what we're going to encounter. I find that unknown. Like if you have to go in and kill a dragon, you're like, well, we're third level characters. We can't kill a dragon. So what's the point? If you say you have to steal this thing from a dragon, even a third level character is like, we might be able to pull it off. you know, and that's where I find that fascinating.
hmm
Monsters have challenge ratings. If the GM knows what the challenge rating, if the players don't know what the challenge rating is, they don't know what this creature is, then there's a bit of an unknown factor going in there of whether players believe that they can take this thing out or not. But it's once again, I find the idea of players going into this territory and having no idea what they're going to encounter. They just hear stories. They buy maps from other people, and you don't know how reliable those maps are. That's interesting to me.
So I'm going to talk about playtesting because
Mm.
I know the, I think a lot of people misunderstand playtesting in tabletop role-playing games and think that the playtesting process in tabletop role-playing games is as robust as video games, and it's just not. One, because it's just too blooming expensive and it takes too bloody long. Um, and Wizard of the Coast's playtesting process, for example, I think the longest playtesting process they might have, if you're lucky, is 4 years, and you might see 2 years you won't even see anything. It's all behind doors and really slow and small scale, and then they'll open it up, and then maybe it's playtesting, and maybe it's just surveys. But how much playtesting has taken place with what you've got, if any?
Well, if you're an independent publisher,
Hmm.
there's a couple things that people don't really know. One, it's difficult to get large groups.
Yeah.
And so for me, there's a few things. I have a pretty active Discord. You have a pretty active Discord. I think your Discord destroys mine. It's a very good Discord.
Mine is almost non-existent. There's a couple of people who comment occasionally, and then sometimes I will say something if I feel like I have something useful to say. Yeah.
Yeah, so we are going to be opening up the mechanics for playtesting, and I'm going to be running my own game for the first time in quite some time, quite soon. The important thing for me, and this is something I've done that I did with Ultramodern. I generally sometimes I go, okay, I'll do as much testing I can. I'll do as much reading as I can. And then eventually I have to like, okay, I've gotten my feedback. I'm going to publish the rules and put it out for sale. I'm not going to release the print on demand just yet. I'm going to wait. And then I wait a good month or two and people will buy the game. A lot more people get the game. And then I get a lot of comments going, what about this? What about this? What about this? So I went, okay, let's change that. Let's change that. Let's change that. Let's change that. So people come out. Like I used to have tons of advice for Ultramodern. I delayed the Ultramodern release, the physical release for a good 3 or 4 months. And I was able to go in and just re-update the PDF. Like this PDF's been updated. Here are the changes I've done. Here's the PDF. This is the changes that I've done. And then once I look around and people are like, no, everything looks good. Does everything look good? Okay. Activate the print on demand. Let's get the physical book going once I've gotten the consensus. Because it's very difficult to get people to get invested in this set of mechanical rules. And in the same context, so for example, like dealing with the 5e gun rules, how do you balance out 800 weapons? What I actually hired a military expert to go who plays D&D, and he's just like, oh, Jesus Christ, all right. And getting into it. So for me, I get most of my feedback sometimes post-release. But if it's a digital release, you just update the files.
Right.
It's unfortunately we see that with video games. So many video games get released bugged, and they call it a early access. And then they go in and they fix the game, they fix the game, they fix the game to an official release. And the official release is activating the print on demand. So in certain situations, it happened with Ultramodern, where I went in and I updated the main PDF 2 or 3 times before we went on full print. Because we're doing off of a Kickstarter, people who back the game will get access to all these rules, and then they get to see them. They get to see the evolution of the rules. They can make suggestions, and I can alter the rules. And so by the time it comes on PDF, I have that. But it's generally quite difficult for independent and small publishers to get dozens and dozens or hundreds and hundreds. Like if you're an independent publisher, you'll be lucky if you get 4 or 5 play testers to give you active feedback.
And I would also say that a lot of independents might well not do any play testing. They just write it out and then just hope.
Yeah, let the chips fall the way may.
And you might think that sounds terrible, people, but the reality is that the bigger companies, since I know what they're like because I've done some play testing, their time frames are not that big, and their conclusions they come from doing their play testing are not necessarily completely accurate because they didn't have perfect information or enough time. Like,
Look at all they did with fourth edition. Look at the massive
oh God,
changes they had to do to fourth edition after they released the fourth edition player's handbook. We're like,
yeah,
holy, this errata. When people talk like, my God, the errata for Ultramodern is 3 pages. I said, have you ever seen the fourth edition player's handbook errata? It is 24 pages
yeah,
of
it's not,
changes that they had to do. And it goes further than that too, because when we look at, you had your Ultramodern in your hand. I have a full disclaimer in the mecha chapter. I said, this isn't tested. I threw these rules out. I sent it to backers. I go, hey guys, and they all came back and said, this is insanely complex. And every once in a while, somebody comes back and says, this is confusing to me. And I'm like, I never had anyone tested. I wrote that system. It was I almost basically copy pasted it from a very old mecha construction system called Mecton from the early 90s, and I adapted it to 5e. But I say a disclaimer and say, this isn't tested, but have some fun, go to town.
Mm.
If you think there's something that majorly needs to be changed, please let me know. Thankfully, no one has actually come out and said that this system doesn't work or it's broken. But it is definitely complicated. So since there's definitely some situations where I've released products that have not been thoroughly tested, but I'm usually quite open about that.
So there's a couple of things I'd like to say about this too, and you'll let me know if you think I'm on the wrong track with this. The good thing though about a company that releases a product, whether it has not been fully tested or tested at all, but is updating their PDF, if you're buying it off DriveThru RPG, if you've bought it once and they update it, you don't have to pay for it again. You just update it. That's my
Yeah,
understanding. So you
yeah, that's absolutely right. I've
you're paying
updated.
for
Yeah,
all future changes to that PDF coming off
yeah,
DriveThru RPG, and a lot of places do the same sort of thing. Not everybody, but DriveThru RPG, and that's where these things are going. That's how they operate. So obviously, the print on demand is not going to work that way, but the PDF will, which is good, and it's much better than having the PDF and then a separate document, which is the errata and all the changes that keep happening over the years as you go along, that you then have to then slip in or then refer to because it does get integrated. People do integrate them. So I think that's a good thing. And then the other thing I was going to say is when it comes to playtesting, I think a lot of people assume that magic items get play tested, but they're designed to break the game. You don't actually have to really play test magic items. The only aspect of magic items that I understand that you have to play test is people's understanding of how to use them. If they get confused reading the entry and they don't know how to apply it to their game, then there might be a problem. But it's never about are they too are they underpowered or are they too powered, because they are ultimately, and in whatever respect, they are intended to break the game in some bizarre way that might be to your benefit or might not. Correct?
yeah. It's exactly right. It's exactly right. There are
Okay.
so many things, like even I will fully admit, for example, giving players a huge mecha that they can pilot. I say like I even say disclaimer is like giant robots are dumb. Can we fully admit that these are dumb? There's no reason to but if you want to, here's the rules for allowing 2 or 3 players to control a huge mecha. And someone's like, oh, I can't wait to do that. And I'm like, and I was supposed to say, here's a note to GMs. If you've given players carte blanche to use and operate a huge mecha 24/7, that's on you. That's not my fault.
Yeah.
You have to take full responsibility for that.
Yeah.
It's like most of the time they're just going to have regular armor. Maybe you'll let them use this huge mecha for a battle or a couple sessions. But if this is the common thing, if this is their wagon that they
Mm.
are using, I'm
Yeah.
like, that's really on you, the GM. I'm gonna wash my hands of responsibility for breaking your game.
Yeah. So the reason I'm using the reference to the magic item is I think the armory, so the weapons and the armor and the mechs that you were talking about are essentially just the expanded version of a magic item. For me, I would be thinking there might be a few weapons in here that are balanced to be played, and you don't have to worry too much about having to adjust the system a lot to cope with them. But probably a huge portion of them are going to do crazy stuff, and that is the intention of these things. When you say armory, really what you're saying is huge blooming book of magic items that aren't for
Yeah.
fantasy, really.
There's this dividing line, the fact that one-handed, two-handed weapons, they're your traditional, that's your sword, your pistol, and their damage ratio reflects that. And that's the reason why, going back to what we said at the beginning, why D&D's rules don't work, because they approach all weapons as magic items. Whereas like, no, no, if it's going to be used by somebody, then like that pistol does 1 die 4, it doesn't do 2 die 8. That's stupid, and that type of thing. But then you get into the heavy weapons and the super heavy weapons and the massive weapons, and I'm like, if the GM says, no, no, you guys get to have an M1 Abrams, I go, well, that's on you. I mean, that's,
Yeah.
like I said, that's the impossibly powerful magic item. It is a 20 million gold armored strong point with a massive cannon in front of it. Yes, the stats are there. Yes, the rules are there. It is an extremely powerful magic item. It's an artifact. And
Mm.
D&D has been putting in game-breaking artifacts. That's, you can look at the M1 Abrams and saying that's a game-breaking magical artifact. Nothing much changes mechanically. So you hit the
Yeah.
nail on the head with that one too.
Yeah. I guess the other thing I wanted to mention is, and we haven't really talked about your bestiary. I actually saw that you have been doing some flip throughs of your books, which I like. I know, there's this thing right now. You remember when Wizard of the Coast started harassing people for showing their flip throughs of their books and making all that noise, and then suddenly everybody's freaked out and they don't want to show anybody's book on camera now for fear that they might wind up with somebody slapping them on the hand or throwing lawyers at them. I was nice to see you doing some flip throughs, but the other thing I was like, monsters and creatures, because you're going to be dealing with creatures, monsters, aliens, robots, stuff like that, and whatever else. Um, and you were talking about challenge rating. There's that other thing. I mean, I've made a lot of monsters and stuff myself, and had to deal with the 2014 Monster Manual and challenge rating and so forth. And um, I'm assuming that you have retooled your monster. I mean, challenge rating is challenge rating. It's never going to be perfect. It is really just a mathematical guide. Um, and but I'm assuming that a lot of that stuff is not going to be of no use to you if you're using some of the higher end artifacts, magic items from the armory. Like you're gonna have to figure it out.
Yeah, so like the armory, so the bestiary has like 3 or 4 different types of classification of monsters. We have some fantasy monsters in there from Amethyst. That's about 20%. Then I got the giant mechs. I've got the big tanks. I've got the aircraft. I got monster stats for all of them. But the vast majority, I understand that most people can be dealing with are the basic adversaries. And the basic adversaries are your challenge rating 1 to 20 people, and they are general traits, and you can apply certain templates to them. Robot, you know, alien, uh, gorilla, not a physical gorilla, the GU gorilla,
Yeah.
and various templates that can take, and so you can have normal human-sized opponents for your game. But in that same context, the run rule I really liked back in the old days of fourth edition that I don't know why they didn't return was the minion rules. It's one of my favorite rules. Like, you see those 5 guys there? That's one technical monster. So when you fire that gun and you do that, so yeah, you're killing 5 guys. Did we destroy 5 creatures? No, you didn't. You killed 10 people. That was actually just one dude, because that's basically the equivalent challenge rating. So that's one way of creating that active battle, that war, that kind of epicness to modern or modern style combat without throwing challenge rating experiences into disarray,
Hmm.
where you can have a situation where you get to use the the magic or artifact scale firearms in a way where it seems to have that desired effect without breaking the mechanics of the game.
Hmm. And so when you're using the Sparkplug Chronicles in the Armory, my understanding is that the bestiary stuff, a lot of that is had some significantly more play testing because it's been around a long time. You've just pulled it in from different sources, correct? And added a bit more stuff. So there's a
Yeah,
lot
yeah.
more,
So
lot more
the
time.
idea,
10,
the
I
I
would 10 year, would it be at least 10 years of um some of them would probably have had at least sort of 10 years to knock the kinks out of them.
Well, for me, the hilarious thing is that I had access to the 5e rules before a lot of people did. This is something you and I've talked about a long time ago.
Mm.
The fact that um, I kind of got screwed over by certain people within the journalistic gaming sphere. I'm not going to name names uh, because they were trying to get information from me because I had access to the alpha playtest because I got befriended by Mike Merles, who appreciated the fact that my company was supporting D&D through the fourth edition era. And they wanted me on board to help them. And there were a few conversations and a few thoughts were dropped, like me picking up the Spelljammer franchise was one thing that was mentioned, which never came to pass, obviously. And then I had access to the alpha rules, and I knew that there was going to be a 5e OGL. I apparently was one of the few people outside of the Wizards that knew that, to the point when I released the announcement that my D&D 2014 Kickstarter for Amethyst was going to be adaptable to 5e. I had publishers telling me, you can't do that. And I'm like, yes, I can. And they're like, you must know something that I don't. So I've had 10 years of experience writing for 5e. That's the reason why Ultramodern came out. The OGL for 5e came out in January of 2016. Or is it 2017, 2016? And then I had Amethyst out that May, and Ultramodern 5, the first Ultramodern 5 came out the following August. So I was the first person to put out anything non-fantasy, and I was able to jump the gun and get in front of other people by 2 or 3 years because I had access to the rules and I knew an OGL was coming.
Mm.
So I have that experience. So that's like, so when we look at the adversary rules in the Bestiary, these are updated rules that have been around for 8 years.
Right. Yeah, I
And
figured it
so
was
there,
about that. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, so there's a lot of
To be
experience.
fair, I mean it's 2025 and 2014, and of course we can go back to 2012, 2011, where we were getting some of the monsters, but really the alpha play test was, I don't know, I would say I felt like the alpha play test started about 6 months before they released the damn thing. It felt like that.
Well,
Uh,
the friend, no, no,
it wasn't
I
very a
was
long period. It was very short.
I was part of the actually I wasn't part of the alpha test. I was part of the friends and family test, which just came up
Uh,
before that. And I always make jokes that I have some stories about how rough that system. That was part of the Monty Cook era when Monty Cook was writing for 5e.
yeah, I remember.
And that was a mess.
Yeah.
But it gave me ideas and gave me, okay, it was like, okay, I see where they're going with this. And
Mm.
then things change and things change and things change
Yeah.
again. And then what we ended up getting by the alpha test was something unrecognizable to what we saw before. But by then Cook had left. But yeah, for me, I have people ask me, why don't you write for other systems? I go, well, because 5e is the largest market and I know that system very well. Of course,
Yeah.
now that I have to now learn the 2024 rules, which tweaked a few things, but not too much. I didn't really have to change so
I
much.
don't know that it's even much point, mate. I honestly, I think, I think they screwed the pooch with 2024, and 2025 Monster Manual, frankly. But my point is, unlike something like magic items, or lots of advanced armor and weapons, which you're talking about, monsters you have to play test, right? And playtesting monsters can't be done in 6 months, 1 year, 2 years. It just doesn't work that way. You actually need years. It's like half a decade to a decade, particularly when you're dealing with hundreds of friggin' things. And you've actually got that going on with your bestiary. So for those of you who are worried about the bestiary, I'm pretty confident that you'll find that Chris has probably well and truly had a chance to knock out the kinks and problems with a lot of that stuff because it's been iterated on, more than a few times.
Oh
Um,
yeah, like I said, the Bestiary only has about 120 new monsters. Most of them are just variations of existing ones, like the adversaries, for example. We had 2 or 3 adversaries for each challenge rating. Now there's 4.
mhm.
So it's not a huge difficult trend. And I would say that monsters I would say that I don't know. Maybe I disagree and say I think player characters I think need the most testing.
Yes, they do. Yes, absolutely.
Then
That
monster. I
was the
think
next thing I was
player
going to say is
characters are
player
probably the
character
hardest thing.
options, species or races, whatever the heck they want to call them, backgrounds, that sort of stuff.
Yeah,
That needs play test. Although I feel like background should not require a lot of play testing if you stop trying to make them things that could be optimized, because it's a
yeah,
bloody background in the first place. It shouldn't have to have a huge amount of weight on it. But things like the class in particular, and then probably the species after,
yeah,
and then the background should be fairly unimportant, because if you've done it right, it's probably mostly just fluffy bits. So you're kind of, before you were the hero, the adventurer, the explorer, or
yeah.
whatever the heck it was.
I think after the Armory and Sparkplug is done, we're actually going to do a new player's book for Ultramodern, where we're going to expand and rebalance those classes once again based on 10 years of work. These classes are 8, 9 years old. Uh, just so because I've included a bunch of new rules in the Armory. I want our new player. I want the player characters from Ultramodern to take advantage of those mechanics. But that's our next thing to go after that. But once again, you're dealing with the fact that I want to update this based on 10 years of feedback that people have been providing.
Yeah,
And, I want to do that. I want to create a bunch of new classes. I have 4 classes from Amethyst Revelations that I'm porting over, which are non-magical. And so that we'll have about 14, 15 classes. So that's probably next summer,
right.
a project we'll do next summer. But once again, you're talking about, once again, the results of 9 years of feedback. The same thing with the October's Arcane Almanac, which is 12 magic systems. 5 of them have been the result of lots of work, and and 3 of them are brand spanking new, so they didn't get a lot of testing. But that's the way it is.
Right. Yeah. But yeah, I'm assuming with the classes that you're doing next year, and that project, that you're iterating on it. You're not wholesale cutting and chopping things away and adding new things in, and then just hoping that it'll work. I'm assuming that the adjustments will probably be to improve people's understanding of how it's supposed to work, so it's not too confusing.
Yeah, it's more like 1%, 2% fine tuning certain
Right.
things.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't want to do like the fourth edition essentials when they
Yeah.
took 4E and said, "Oh, you just made it incompatible to our system." I want to just say, look, my wording wasn't perfect. Let's just play with the wording. Like like ladders, for example, which is a mechanic in Ultramodern. I was just like, people were asking about clarification. And I'm like, damn it, it's weird that after 8 years that people are still confused by this mechanic. Okay, like this is one thing I'm going to address. I want to make sure that you're 100% aware of what that means, what those wording is.
Yeah.
It is an evolution. You do learn certain things.
Yeah, because I know a lot of people have looked at 2014 D&D and then 2024 D&D and said there's not a lot of changes. But in some cases, since I've been looking at all those classes, there are significant changes, and they sure as hell wouldn't have had enough time to play test that stuff because they've got level 1 to 20 to deal with. So you actually create another big huge hole and extends the period of the kinks and the bugs and the problems and the whining from customers when you start doing that sort of thing. So you're almost better to just make small adjustments, see how it works, and then leave it a few more years, come back to it again. And then if you're going to do something, just start completely fresh with a new thing and say, okay, here we go. Let's start that process all over again. I mean, that's sort of how my general thoughts are in terms of the development of classes to fit into something like Sparkplug and the Armory book, is that little adjustments are often better than making huge adjustments.
Yeah. That also being said, though, I remember during the OGL fiasco, you were a vocal supporter of me creating a variant 5e rule set that was pushing the envelope in ways that the other 5e rule sets weren't doing. They were playing it very safe.
Mm,
And when I was playing around with some mechanics, you were saying you got to push it. You got to break. You got to break more things. And so I'm actually interested in like after the player's book is to go in there. You know what? I got some free time. I got lots of artwork I'm sitting on. Let's break
break
things.
it.
Let's throw these rules out there and creating a system that is something that's just the best of everything I like. But
Mm.
I always appreciated the fact that when I was you were watching those workshops, you're less like I was like, I'm disappointed. You're not pushing it further. Push it further. I push it further and like push it more. Break the system. I don't like this mechanic. Get rid of it.
Well,
So
it's
that's something I
but
mechanically I'm interested in doing that.
yeah, I'm glad to hear. I mean, there's been a lot of people who are doing that, right? There's lots and lots of people making stuff that are doing that. I actually went back to my project and I decided that before, if I can do it, I don't know if I can, but before I do it, I would like to make a version of 5e or D&D. I don't think it'll look very much like 5e by the time it's finished, that a
Mm.
4 or 5 year old can play, which is a big ask
Yeah.
because you talking about push it and cut it back. When you start talking about a 4 or 5 year old playing a game like that, you're not talking about just getting out some hedge clippers. You're talking about getting a bulldozer. So, so yeah. But
And isn't that what their that's what their effect is? A lot of people when they look at 5e and they look at the 2024 edition, there's a lot of people that kind of think that they're trying to make it digestible to a younger and a younger audience.
but it's not.
I know it's weird that way.
It's really strange. Yeah. Yeah. Is there anything else you'd like to say? I think we've kind of covered. I've asked all the
No,
questions.
yeah, other than just the announcement that the Kickstarter for Sparkplug was supposed to launch this month, but we've decided because I want more testing and because I want to write more content and have more testing that we're actually pushing it now till probably February or March of next year.
Right. Okay.
So
And
there's plenty of time, and I'll be posting rules in various discords for people who want to see these new rules that we're playing with, both with the Armory and with these prestige rules that we're playing around with Sparkplug Chronicles.
mm. I'd also like to point out for those of you who haven't figured it out, if when you, I guess the jump between, your traditional fantasy tabletop role-playing game like Dungeons and Dragons or Castles or Crusades and Tunnels and Trolls and stuff like that, the jump from that to going really high tech and going all biological technology, it kind of is very similar in many respects. Um, the only difference is that the explanation is not it happens because of magic. You know what I mean? So I kind of feel like they are, I guess, it's not a narrative. It's definitely different narratively. But I guess in terms of the feel of play, I feel like they will actually be very similar.
Yeah, that's one thing I think people will be surprised at when both with the original 5e rules that I was doing for Ultramodern to stuff I was doing later, a lot of times people like when I was making magical like high-tech artifacts, I was just looking at the magic items books and goes, yeah, that's just technology. And, always think of that Arthur C. Clarke, any advanced society is imperceptible to magic, where if you have something that's high tech enough, it's magic. I go, well, that's exactly what you do when you can have something that's just like I cast a spell or I push a button. The end mechanic is still the same. You're still teleporting using teleportation rules from this point to that point. So many times where I have a piece of gear or an item or an organic organism or a monster, it's like, oh my God, that's a fantasy monster. No, it's not. It's a genetically engineered mutation that happens to have the exact same stats and looks exactly the same.
Mm,
Because at the end of the day, the fluff is all that changes, the skin
mm,
mechanically things don't really need to change.
yeah. Well, thanks, Chris. Well, I'm going to say goodbye to everybody. Thank you for watching and listening. We covered the topic. We went off on some strange tangents, which I, and we talked about some future projects that you're working on, which be interesting to see how that all goes. And yeah, so thank you for coming.
Thank you, man. Appreciate it. I would love talking to you, even on or off camera.
Yeah, for those of you who haven't figured it out, the fat chance that I do these sorts of things in the future. This is this may well be the last one. This may well be the last one. But a good chat, and yeah, thank you for coming. And until next time, keep rolling those 20s.